Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Congressman Kinley, for your leadership on this issue in our great state of West Virginia. I thank Congressman comments and giving some personal stories about how this affects real Americans from different states. Because our great country is blessed with abundant natural resources. Unfortunately, President Obama has made a campaign commitment to destroy coal as a domestic energy source, and he's intent on fulfilling that promise. Just 2 weeks ago, the Office of Surface Mining under the Department of Interior released its latest set of rules and regulations that will cripple the coal industry, not only in West Virginia, but across the country. These new rules and regulations are over 2,500 pages in length. And if you don't know exactly what that looks like, here it is, ladies and gentlemen, 6 folders full of new regulations, 2,500 pages. This is what it looks like. Okay? And they give us 60 days. The Department of Interior has given us 60 days to go through this. That's a lot of work. At the very least, a 120-day extension is needed beyond the current 60-day comment period. I already joined Chairman Bishop of the Natural Resources Committee, where I serve, and 43 members of Congress in sending a letter to Obama, the administration, requesting a 120-day extension of the comment period for the recently announced job-killing stream buffer zone regulation right here. Now, my staff and I, my hardworking staff of the 2nd District of West Virginia, have been going through this very hard over the last several days since it came out and trying to look at all the ridiculous regulations in this bill. And we've come across a couple things that I think are worth pointing out so far. For instance, on page 1,201 of the proposed regulation, we found something. It says, quote, in the regulation, ensure that electric power transmission lines and other transmission facilities used for or incidental to surface mining activities on the permit area are designed and constructed to minimize electrocution hazards to raptors and other avian species with large wingspans. The Office of Surface Mining is worried about protecting raptors and other birds from electrocution, so they created a special regulation just to prevent that from happening. That's right, here it is required. We found it on page 1,201, buried within thousands of pages of regulations, that coal companies build special power lines to prevent, quote, raptors from getting zapped. Now, I wonder if the environmentalists have the same concerns for their own projects. According to the Smithsonian, somewhere between 140,000 and 328,000 birds die each year from flying into wind turbines. On page 1,100 exactly, we got even more new rules here. It says, quote, you may not conduct any surface mining activity that is likely to jeopardize the continued existence of threatened or endangered species listed by the Secretary or proposed for listing by the Secretary, or that is likely to result in the destruction or adverse modification of designated critical habitat in violation of the Endangered Species Act of 1973. That's a long sentence with a lot of words. This absurd regulation would prohibit mining near animals that the Director of Interior has simply proposed listing as endangered or threatened. Now, it'd be one thing to prevent mining operations around animals that are actually endangered, but this regulation goes far, far beyond protecting endangered species. This is a stunning regulatory power grab that an environmental extremist secretary will use to put miners out of business. Even more ridiculous is just the heart of this rulemaking, which is to fundamentally change the definition of a stream to include temporary streams. Temporary streams are essentially ditches that fill up with water when it rains and the water goes away quickly. They're calling those streams now. A recent study from the National Center for Mining estimates that these rules will destroy as many as 80,000 coal jobs across the country. My colleague, Congressman Andy Barr, put some names to those stories of individuals who are losing their jobs, just referred to in his remarks, and I appreciate that. These are hardworking American taxpayers who are simply trying to provide for their families, and these idealistic, extremist regulations are putting them out of work. It's harming families not only in our state of West Virginia and Kentucky, across the country. These new regulations would be catastrophic to the coal industry, and all of the hardworking American families depend on coal to keep their energy costs low. The economy of the Appalachian region and West Virginia in particular are uniquely threatened by these regulations because of our mountainous topography and abundance of small streams. Industry estimates say this administrative action could mean 45 to 79% of the coal reserves in the Appalachia would no longer be usable. The damage from such a critical blow to the industry would create a ripple of hardship in our state. 90% of energy, I think my colleague Congressman Kinley mentioned this already, but 90% of the energy in West Virginia is produced by coal power, and distress in the coal industry will raise home energy prices and business energy costs for everybody. Low-income folks are going to struggle with this. Furthermore, approximately 60% of West Virginia state business tax revenue is derived from coal revenues. So a significant decrease in these revenues would put severe financial strain on the state budget and could potentially hurt crucial services in our state, like public health, state-funded health clinics, and the funding of our law enforcement agencies. I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues on the Natural Resources Committee to make sure that my bill, H.R. 1644, and I thank my colleague from West Virginia and my colleague from Kentucky for co-sponsoring this bill. It's also known as the STREAM Act, and I want to push this to move it swiftly through committee before any real damage can be done by this harmful new rule. It's time that the administration wakes up and realizes that their regulations are hurting hard-working American taxpayers for no good reason. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.